Here. Thanks for having me.
Well, look, first and foremost, partner of the show, thanks for believing in it. You make this all possible. Like, you are quite literally upholding the European ecosystem, is what it feels like right now. Like, AI engine, ETN, ventures. What else do you put your money into?
Well, we build a dev tool, so we try to engage developers wherever possible. And honestly, I think there's so much promise to the European ecosystem. So, we're just trying to partner with anyone we can and trying to be helpful overall. But
Look, love it. Look, I want to start at the beginning, right? Well, I was saying on like as streamers, we were figuring out the technical issues. It's like I met you, 3 to 4 months ago, cafe in Oxford Street, and we're talking about vision for the future. But like I think we really hit it off on understanding the application of ACi.dev. And you are building past the curve of what most people understand. And what I really want to get into is what the hell is an MCP, man?
Okay, yeah, well, getting right into it. Well, MCP, Model Context Protocol, it's a protocol from Anthropic, obviously, for the folks on who are watching the show who use Claude, you're probably familiar with the company, but it's a way for AI to more easily be able to use other pieces of software. Layman's term, that's what it is. And what it does is it standardizes how you do that. So it used to be, if you wanted AI to work with other software. You had to write a lot of custom connectors. You had to write custom integrations. What MCP as a protocol is trying to do is trying to standardize that layer to make it very easy for language models to work with other software, with APIs, with other tools, etc. And funny enough, you should ask that because ACi.dev, so ACI stands for Agent Computer Interface. And as you could probably infer from the name, it's like an analog to human computer interface. We're kind of in the business of designing and facilitating how like AI interacts, well, agents, interact with other systems, other software systems. And we started the company literally 2 months before MCP as a protocol came out.
Mhm.
So we were kind of trying to build MCP before MCP
So
came
was
out.
it
Then obviously,
great that it got released and then you could build the infrastructure around that and the architecture around that, or was it actually quite a big blow to the company?
I would say in hindsight, it's a good thing in the sense that I think no name startups that just start out and has like absolutely no business building a protocol. I mean, we weren't actively trying to build a protocol, but in hindsight, it like effectively it was what we were trying to do. And I think having Anthropic being obviously one of the main frontier labs drive that effort has just like made the standardization process a lot smoother. And obviously, it's been able to build a lot of momentum precisely because one of these like major labs is behind it, and there are now tons of smart people working on it. So I think like net, it's good for the AI ecosystem for the company itself. It wasn't detrimental in the sense that like we were able to adopt MCP quite quickly and build around it. So yeah, that was like quite good.
And so as the standard gets better, as the models get better, you get better. And it's this like current narrative around if the models get better, the company gets better, we can iterate faster, we can build more features, right? Is it the same thing with MCP?
Interestingly enough, I would say no. I,
Why?
I would say like yeah. So that's a good question, and something that we've been thinking about within the company a lot too. It's like if you're building on the application layer,
Hmm.
where you're building Lovable or you're building some sort of like agentic application for like a specific business workflow, that's very much a situation where as the model gets better, you like your product naturally also gets better. But I think like when it comes to infra and middle layer, that's not automatically the case, especially with like MCP, because like say we're in the business of building middle layers for MCP, or there's some other startups who are in the business of building specific MCP servers designed for agents to use. Um, those don't inherently necessarily need to have any inference involved within the offering itself. So it's not really a situation where if the model gets better, their MCP server naturally gets better. Their MCP server, on the flip side, you might actually run into a situation where you over optimize the MCP server design. Like as an example, it used to be, like tool calling for a lot of models was a lot worse than what it is now. So then like there could be steps that you do in terms of optimizing how you design your MCP server that could actually be unnecessary for future models. So it's actually like a balancing act. Yeah, obviously there are some optimizations that would be universal, but yeah, I would say that's by default actually not the case for a lot of like middleware and middle layer like companies.
So how are you thinking about improving the product then? What do you have to do differently to an application layer company?
So like in terms of improving the product, like first off, you have to stick very close to the protocol. Like even
Right.
even though like protocol is
So
supposed
like
to be standardized.
I guess do you work closely with the Claude team?
Not necessarily the Claude team. Like
Sorry,
there's a separate.
The Anthropic MCP team. My bad. I just
Yeah,
Claude's
yeah.
in
So
top of
there's a
mind.
separate. Yeah, right. So there's like a separate like governance committee for MCP as a whole, and yeah, like I wouldn't say like we work closely with them, but then like we do follow like what's going on very closely. Yeah.
And then internally, how do you make the product better? How do you even begin to think at an inference layer of like what innovation looks like?
Yeah, so a big part of it is so when it comes to MCP design, if we were building MCPs, a big part of it is what we call agent experience engineering.
Right.
So similar to kind of user experience engineering, it's like AX, right? Like how do you design an MCP so that it's like easily usable for agents?
Hmm.
And that part takes evals, but then like on our side, it's also a lot more around kind of like security and governance. So it's really working with talking to the right teams, talking with the right potential customers, and then figuring out what they really need in order to build trust uh, in how they use AI tools. That's kind of like what we're in the business of doing, because like inherently, like what Gate 22, which is our latest product from ACi.dev is, it's an AI tooling governance platform, right? So it's like you say like you have teams that are already using AI tools and whatnot, but oftentimes you don't get the full ROI on your AI tooling implementation and adoption. Like
Hmm.
you might be using Cursor, you might be using ChatGPT, but you'll a lot of teams only use them for like the most basic tasks because they don't actually trust connecting those tools with their databases, with their observability stack or other software in their organization. But if you do allow that to happen, there are a lot of ROI that can be unlocked, right? But then the big problem here is like, how do I trust agents to actually be able to do the right things, not screw things up when it gets access to some of these systems. So that's really what we're there to solve. So a big part of like improving our product is like making sure we're actually targeting the right things for the right people, making sure that the systems that we design are very, very, very clear in terms of like how they address those key pain points.
I want to jump ahead like 5 years down the line. Like, does MCP look like what we have today with Qi charging and like MagSafe? Is that sort of the standard it's going to be in the future, where it's just embedded into every product?
Potentially. So I think, with the current pace of innovation in the ecosystem, I think 5 years may as well be eternity. I'd be lying if I could tell you like what I'll see happening in like 6 months. So look, there are a few ways this can play out. Now, before I get there, I think like I want to detour a little bit and a very common analogy for MCP is that it's the USB-C of tool use, right? Now the irony is that people don't realize how fragmented and crap well not to say that this
You get a 1 volt USB-C, you get a like an 800 volt USB-C. There's like everything in between, and you don't know what to use for
yeah.
what product.
Exactly. So MCP is currently like a little bit in that state. Like it's a great program, and honestly, the designers of like MCP are extremely intelligent, and there are a lot of really smart people governing that. The thing is, it's just so new that when it comes to adoption, it's not universal. I'll take an example. Like within MCP, there are like three primitives in the MCP server design. So, well, first off, like for the protocol overall, there are like a few aspects to it, right? There's the MCP server, which is like where you use to define the tools and whatnot. And then there's the client and the host. So the host is kind of like the main application with which you want to use your MCP with. Within the host, you have like an MCP client that actually knows how to use the MCP like servers. Um, and then you have the server itself. Now, on the server side, it's supposed to have tools
Hmm.
prompts, and sorry, yeah, tools prompts. So anyway, there are supposed to be like three primitives, but the thing is like on the client side right now for a lot of them, it doesn't use all three, right? So like yeah, so it's supposed to be tools, prompts, and resources, but then like most clients only implement um only only really like target the tool part. So
Hmm.
even that, it's not like fully used. And there's like some back and forth with regards to like the spec when it comes to auth as well as like kind of like session management and all that. But I think like eventually like it'll settle. Now in 5 years time, like who knows? It's possible that at some point another protocol comes along and for whatever reason, it ends up getting adopted more. Or, MCP could continue to be kind of like the default protocol, which is very likely. But one problem with MCP is like right now it kind of cannibalizes existing SaaS businesses, right? So then like say like I always use like Notion as an example. Like Notion has their own AI product, but personally I don't use Notion AI. I prefer like using the Notion MCP with ChatGPT. So in this
Hmm.
case, if Notion puts out an MCP server for their service, but they're also trying to make money from their own AI offering, it kind of like cannibalizes each other. So then it's possible, that like either companies would eventually have to figure out how do they complement these two aspects, or they might just all in on one, right? And so if like a company decides, hey, my AI offering is very core to my own business, I'm just not going to offer like an MCP server, then adoption there might plateau, or the the bull case scenario for MCPs would be like everyone recognizes like, hey, actually, now that's just designed for agents as the end user, right? And then like we'll all make sure our MCPs are really good. Then the MCP ecosystem overall would like thrive even more, right? So I think that there are like a few different potential paths, and I think it's just way too early to really know like which one's going to play out.
And at its core, right, what you're building is the ability for agents to go and do work, come back, and it's almost it is a mission control center that sits underneath a Claude code or underneath
Mhm.
a Chat GPT, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. So Gate 22 is an open source MCP gateway and control plane, and it's
Hmm.
really designed for engineering teams to use. So when it comes to kind of like how teams currently use AI tools or they build AI agents for internal use,
Yep.
from our conversations with customers and users, there are really three kind of like core pain points. So one is around permissions, one is
Hmm.
around security, and the other is around context engineering. I'm going to
Which
dive
one,
into
like, which
each of
one's the
those a little
most
bit.
important for customers?
I think like like they're all needed right now.
Uh-huh.
But it's more so like a situation where like I think right now the more pressing one, in our opinion, is permissions.
Hmm.
Because like for the other two, like when it comes to security, there are some cases where it's important, but then like it's like layered on top of that foundation.
And when we say
Um,
permissions, what are we
but
describing actually? Because, like, just for context, we have Newsmark as one of the partners, right? And I've talked to Dhruv extensively around like, isn't the whole thing with WhatsApp that they don't train on your data? And he's like, well,
mhm.
yeah, they can do that. But what we're going to do is say to you, like, we're going to use this data so well, your experience of using the product is even better. So they don't actually mind it. They trust it anyway. Do you
Mhm.
find a similar blend?
So I think in our case, like permissions is quite a different context. So
Hmm.
then it's more so like say right now, for example, if you have like an engineering team or if some sort of team that's using Cursor, ChatGPT, Claude Code, what have you, and you want to do more with it, right? So then, like right now, say like if you're using Cursor, I can write the code for you, whatnot. What you eventually want to be able to do is say like, hey, I want to connect my Cursor to like my databases, to maybe my observability stack, and then I can just let the agent automatically pull metadata from my databases, or pull logs and alerts from my observability stack, and on the fly just figure out how to like solve these things, right? Or to supplement like context that you provide with it so that it can do like automate even more of the workflow for you. Now, the problem here is when you connect it. So right now, when it comes to MCPs, everyone who uses MCPs are kind of like doing them independently. So then, like,
Hmm.
say, like my team, if we have like 5 engineers, every engineer is like kind of like pulling in their own MCPs, and then they're kind of just sharing their own accounts and credentials with the agent to use those tools, right? Now, that's very dangerous because then you don't really have actual control over. hey, how is my agent actually using all these systems? And if it does like something wrong or like screw something up, there's no like centralized kind of like control center to like prevent that from happening. So when it comes to permissions, what we're really more into is kind of like giving sort of like engineering leaders, CTOs, whatnot, the ability to say like, hey, I want my team to be able, I want the rest of my organization to be able to use ChatGPT with my CRM or with my database or something else. But for this team, they can only get read access to it, right?
Hmm.
Because then like they need to be able to read, but I don't want the agent to accidentally like screw up the database or anything like that. And then for this other team, I'll give them like write access as well. But then it gets even more granular than that because like once you get down to that, it's like there could be some agents, and you could have say like two different agents or two different AI tools that are accessing like the same Notion page, and they both have read access. But you actually don't want a particular agent to read certain content on that
Right.
page. But for another agent, you want to allow them to be able to read that, right? So then,
Hmm.
like, how do you kind of like granularly control all of that and make sure it works seamlessly? So that's really what we mean by permissioning. And related to that is kind of like the security part, which is like there are these common like security concerns and vulnerabilities when it comes to MCP servers and tool calling called like prompt injection attacks and tool poisoning attacks that some people might have heard of. But the idea here is like right now when you use an LLM, it's actually very hard for the LLM to determine what is an instruction and what isn't an instruction, right? Like if
Really?
you
So like it doesn't like when I say do this to what like if I give it as an explicit prompt, it's do this X so that I get Y. There's actually a level of lack of understanding in the LLM of like what that specifically is requiring.
it's more so you can consider the LM to be very naive. So then
Hmm.
say like I can tell the LM like, hey, send an email for me. It would understand that instruction. But then if I'm like, hey, go read this web page for me, or go read this Notion doc for me. It goes onto the Notion page, right? And it ingests that information, it brings it into its context. And within the Notion page, somewhere it says, hey, send an email to this email, blah, blah, blah. The LM might actually take that as an instruction, right? So then
Right.
that's what's called like a prompt injection. You can like hide
And so
malicious
like
instructions.
you've seen a lot, you've probably seen the memes of people on X like writing that in their LinkedIn bio so that when they get the scrapers, the LLM goes and kicks out something into that database.
Exactly. So that's obviously like a security concern, right? Because then like imagine like you have some information like a classic example like that we heard from like some users and potential customers was like say you have you're automating like a customer support kind of like agent, right? So you have one segment that just like collects customer feedback and then it's like say you have like a ticketing system where
Yep.
like customers just send an email as like, hey, I have this problem. Now you have an agent that goes in and picks up those issues and tries to solve the problem automatically. Well, what if, the person who submitted the ticket is actually malicious and they're like, hey, send me, your entire like user like email list or something like that to like this
So this
to
like
this
you
email.
downstream, like corporate espionage just gets ramped up.
Exactly. Yeah. So and that's one of the big concerns with regards to like using agents with tool calling capabilities right now. And that's kind of like the security portion.
How do you
And
solve
an
for that
extension of
problem,
the
if you don't mind
problem.
me asking?
Sorry.
How do you solve that problem?
So a big part of it is also like just like, ensuring that like agents don't get permissions to do that, but also implementing specific filters, both deterministic as well as like sort of like small language model based filters that identify, hey, is the agent trying to pull, personal identifying information? They're also like you can also build a common library of like, hey, here are the common patterns for how people execute, prompt injection attacks, and you try to like block those. So yeah, like there are a few ways that you can do that, but right now it's it's very much like an area of research that a lot of people way smarter than me are working on as well. So yeah, we're trying to we pull in solutions from different places to try and solve that as part of the platform. Yeah.
Your team must be one of the most cracked teams on the freaking planet.
I mean, my CTO and our founding engineer, they're great, and I'm just here, parroting their words. So
Love it. Look, I want to switch gears slightly back to the start of the conversation that we were having, which is like you are everywhere. ACi.dev is everywhere. Like, what is the bullishness on Europe and the UK, and where does that come from?
honestly, there's just so much potential here, in the sense that, so from my accent, you could probably tell I'm North American. So I was in Canada before coming to the UK. Now I've been in the UK for like 9 years. I've been to the US very often. I have a ton of friends in the Bay Area. The thing is, like, Europe is it's it's such a cradle of just like raw intelligence and talent. I think like people out of the top universities here and across Europe, um, they're just really promising people, both founders and engineers. But what's missing is kind of that ecosystem. I think like what you find is like a lot of the really successful companies that people think are American, they also like a lot of them started out in Europe, but then they moved to the US early on, whether due to, better opportunities with capital or just like better access to market, or, uh, easier to, easier environment to do business in, right? But right now, it's not to comment on the U.S. political situation or anything like that. But I think like the world order is kind of like in flux, right? And like Europe is like definitely one of the top contenders for being one of those future kind of vanguards of innovation, I would say. But right now, like there are a lot of things missing with regards to the ecosystem, right? So I think over the last 2 years or so, London has been doing a really good job in fostering like an environment for sort of AI builders. You have like AI tinkerers, initiatives like yourselves, like ventures, and a lot of like key names popping up here and there. You have like Luke Harries from 11 Labs. You have like Matt Carey from Stack One now, at Cloudflare. Like these people have really built out, and obviously like Louis, who originally started AI Tinkers, from Bloop. But like you have these people who are really building out the ecosystem, giving people a forum to exchange ideas, because that's honestly one of the biggest differences between Europe previously and like a place like SF. Like SF, every day there's like something going on. If you want to get expert input on some dev tool, you want to get feedback really quickly, or you want to meet someone, you just go to like an event, the night of, and you can meet a bunch of like relevant people. And that was like kind of like missing here. But I think like over the past few years, thanks to people like you, that's been really improving. But I think there's still a bit of a gap. So honestly, I just want to be able to see that continue developing, and yeah, like support wherever I can.
Across the block, obviously, you sort of describe it as this cradle of talent, it's this cradle of opportunity, it's cradle of innovation. Do you find that if we continue down the path we're on, i.e., we continue building at pace, we continue attracting talent, like there will be a reset in the world order of technology, and Europe will be a player on a global stage?
I think there is that potential, but I think it's more so than just the ecosystem side. I think like on the kind of like policy side, there has to be changes as well. I think
Hmm.
there are like very clear discrepancies. Like take an example, right? Like um, for example, it used to be like obviously for people who wanted to stay in the US, a lot of them they'd have to go through like the H-1B, right? Now H-1B as a route for visa is like uncertain. So then a lot of people would say like, oh yeah, maybe this is an opportunity for the UK or Europe to attract some of those talent. Yes, it is, but like what is in place to attract them, right? So then like if we say like if we want to capitalize on that, then I think on the policy side, what needs to happen is, the government has to make it easier for startups to be able to, first off, in the UK, get, for example, skilled worker visa sponsorship licenses, right? Like that process has to become simpler, so that a lot of startups can actually use that to capitalize on attracting some of those missed H-1B talent. But additionally, I know, there was some discussion going on around how it used to be on the skilled worker visa in the UK. If you
Hmm.
work here for 5 years on that visa, you can then get UK permanent residency. But
Convert it
there's a
in.
possibility that it's going to become 10 years. So in that case, like that doesn't incentivize talent to come to the UK whatsoever, because there's still like no security, right? So then maybe the solution is, we need another visa scheme or whatnot. I'm not a policy like expert, so I can't comment on the nuances there. But that's something that has to be taken into consideration. And in addition to that, it's also a macro factor of sort of like funding as well. So I think like Europe right now is still like quite good for early stage startups, right? So I would say like up to kind of like Series A, like, but not beyond that, because like I think there's a clear gap of top-notch kind of like growth stage investors for so like scale ups as well. So until that changes, right, then you're kind of still stuck in a situation where Europe will be an excellent cradle for amazing early stage companies, and they'll then end up having to take American capital once they've done really well, and then they'll have to set up shop in the US, right, or somewhere else, right. And then in addition to that as well, like even more incentives for kind of like people to actually take risks and become a founder. Um, as an example, there's some things around in the US, if you're a founder and there's this thing called QSBS, where essentially for any entity that you create, if you have an exit event, kind of like the first 5 million of your exit is not counted towards your capital gains tax, right?
Hmm.
Whereas in the UK, the equivalent policy, it's £1 million, but it's lifetime. So it's not even per entity. So even just, from that trade-off, it's like, yeah, you might have a
Incentives are
founder who,
misaligned.
right, exactly. The incentives are misaligned. You might have a founder who builds their first company in the UK, has an exit. Now they've used up that, and then for the next one, they're for sure going to do their second round in the US or something like that, and you end up losing that talent, right? So there are just like a lot of these like pieces here and there. I think ecosystem is the piece that I can touch on, but like all this other like policy stuff, like it's way out of my depth.
There's a
So yeah.
real, like, it genuinely feels like there's definitely, like, life's just a game of incentives, right? It's like how do I incentivize the right people to do the right thing and come on this mission with me? It's like any great startup sort of feels the same way for attracting talent, but then also like you talk about the liquidity events and these exit events, like the incentives has to be aligned there, because like you exit out of ACi.dev for, I don't know, 500 million, let's say, like downstream. Whether that's we go IPO or whether that's we it's an acquisition. If the tax or around that capital gains tax is that large, you're burnt once, you're not going to do it again. And like, what it takes to build a company, and you just rewrite that playbook somewhere else.
Yeah, and look, like I'm not even saying that we shouldn't pay taxes. I think that you're paying, like you have to
Ah,
pay
we're
taxes.
going to live in a society somehow, right?
Right, exactly. But I just mean like, when there is that option on the table where it's like some founders are naturally just gonna be inclined to, take the one that makes more financial sense to them, right? So it's like how do you maintain kind of like competitiveness and retaining kind of your top founders, your top engineers, that sort of stuff. Like that's something for the policymakers to figure out and decide.
Well, on the topic of founders, one thing we love to ask on the show to all of our guests that are founders is like, who's on your Mount Rushmore of founders? For you, who are they?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Who's on your Mount Rushmore of founders? Like, who have you consumed?
Mm.
Who have you read about? Whose learnings do you take and apply to the work you do at ACI?
Wow, that's a tough one. Off the top of my head, I was just trying to think like there are so many founders that I have a ton of respect for. So then I know like more recently, obviously, Anton Osaka from Lovable, he's been, just like trailblazing and pioneering kind of like the European, sort of like a unicorn scene. Actually, one of our investors, Ross Mason, who was the founder of MuleSoft, is someone I looked up to that I look up to greatly as well. He started MuleSoft, it's like a middleware company that then sold to Salesforce and whatnot. Just like super down to earth, super technical guy, and honestly, like one of the best investors I've
I could
ever
see why I could
met.
see why you let him in as an investor. I could see the play there.
Yeah, but yeah, I think like those off the top of my head. But honestly, there's so many. Like yeah, I have to like really have a think and shorten that list at some point.
Well,
But
this
yeah,
has been awesome. Thanks so much for the time. We're going to have you back on again as usual, but this has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for making this possible.
same here. Thank you very much for having me. Cool.
We'll